object-oriented programming, and we'll try to learn the fundamentals which is involved with respect to the C++ programming language. So, in that sense, let's just begin our discussion with a quick comparison between POP to that of an OOP. So, here, as you are observing from the slide, we can just take with a procedural oriented programming, the program is divided into smaller parts, which we call it as functions. Whereas with respect to the object oriented programming, the program is divided into parts, which we call it as objects. In procedural oriented programming, basically the importance is not given to data, but we give preference to functions as well as sequence of actions which needs to be carried out. With an object-oriented programming, the importance is given to the data rather than the procedures or the functions, because we aim here with solving the real-world instances. The third quick point would be the procedural-oriented programming follows one very important approach called as a top-down approach, whereas the object-oriented programming follows the bottom-up approach. The procedural-oriented programming does not have any access specifier, whereas the object-oriented programming has access specifiers, namely public, private, and protected. With a procedural-oriented programming, the data can make the movement freely from one function to another function which is residing inside a system. With our object-oriented programming, the objects can move and communicate with each other with the help of member functions. And we see like with a procedural oriented programming, whenever we would like to add a new data and function, it's not so easy and it's not so well defined to modify the contents which is defined by respective function blocks. Whereas with an object oriented programming, it's a very easy way, and we could add newer data and the newer functions which would be operated with respect to the objects created by the respective classes. Now, with our procedural oriented programming, the function which is defined by the programmer makes use of the term called as global data declarations for sharing the data, and it could be accessed very easily and freely from one function to another function which is residing in the system. And this fact would give an necessity of aiming the security towards the functions. And there is a lack of security whenever we are trying to define the data with a global names. On the other hand, the object-oriented programming provides the facility called as data hiding, which will have the incorporation of security, and the security indirectly means the data which is defined by the code cannot make a movement easily from one function to another function, and it could be either kept public or it could be either considered as private, such that we can have an control towards the accessibility of data. And the next point would be with our procedural oriented programming, there is the concept called as overloading, and that is quite not possible because we cannot act upon the different types to be considered with different functionalities. Whereas with an object oriented programming, overloading is possible, and this could be achieved either in the form of function overloading or operator overloading. Some of the popular example programs which defines procedural oriented programming are C, Fortran, Pascal, VB, and so on. Whereas the popular programs which will be referred and its related languages which takes the underlying concept called as object oriented programming, are nothing but C++, Java, VB.NET, C#.NET, and so on. Now, you just see here the contribution which is given by Dennis Ritchie somewhere between 1969 and 1973, when he was working at AT&T Bell Labs, was actually a greatest contribution to the programming world. And adapting this underlying C language, we have gotten existence of a lot of other popular languages today, which we are taking and we are trying to solve the real-time problems. We could see with the first image, it's an Jan Storstrup, whom we call as father or a developer of C++, and he is by birth a Danish, and he is a computer scientist who gave his contribution of a C++ language in the year 1979. Let's move further with an understanding of how do I just mark up a smaller program, what are the building blocks of the programming language called as C++. In that sense, let's just begin with an understanding of what's a console input and output and what exactly we mean by this console input and output with respect to the C++ language. Firstly, to define a console output with a C++ language, we call as Cout, and the standard output by default it would be a window screen. And Cout is an object of the class called as OStream. And Cout, we can just define it as a console output, which usually will be referred for a monitor or a screen. And Cout would be associated with a special character or a symbol or an operator called as the insertion operator. And this insertion operator could be used with two less than symbols as you're observing from the slide. And this insertion operator, we call it as a binary operator, which can take at least two operands. And this operator is facilitated inside an header file called as iostream.h. And whenever we carry out the programming with a C++, we need to mention the header file which defines for this Cout class called as iostream.h. And this Cout does not require any format specifier during the display. Moving further, we can just try to have a quicker understanding towards the Cout. Let's take an example where I would like to have a display of output sentence. And to use this display, I just give an object Cout. I follow that with the two left shift operator, and I give a string. And this would print for me the output sentence on the screen. Let's just look at the second example. I have a number 120 which needs to be displayed on the screen, and my syntax for that would be with a line number 2. Similarly, I would like to display the value for x which is accepted from the user, and that gives me the display or printing of a value x on the screen. Now you can ask me a question. If I would like to have multiple values to be displayed with a single statement, how do I do it? It's quite easy. I just have to embed the left shift operator those many number of times, which could be visualized as a chained form of observation with respect to a single statement. So we can see here, I give Cout, there is a string this, followed by that we have got an operator, then there is a string is a, then I have an operator, then there is a string, and I'm ending with a semicolon. And this would give me an output as this is a single C++ statement. Look at the second example. What I have here in this example is I just provide an age. There is an years old and my zip code is some value. Assume if a age is 30 and a zip code is 586101, then I would get an output as I am 30 years old and my zip code is 586101, and which you can observe in the output screen. Now, what cout does not do automatically, if there are line breaks and we have instructions which would be given during the time of executions. So now let's just observe the example. In this example, this is a sentence, and I just have an halting done for a sentence, and I give there is another sentence, and this would give me an output which will give me the value as this is a sentence, this is another sentence, without having any line breaks in between. Now, to have a line break, which should provide the first sentence to be displayed on the first line and a second sentence to be displayed with the second line and a subsequent lines, then I need to know the involvement of adding a line breaks inside a program. And we all know /n provides a way in which I can define the actions in the next subsequent line. Now, the same /n can be worked with another way in a C++ language, which I call it as ENDL. That's nothing but end of the line. Let's have a quicker examples. In this first example, we can see the first sentence is displayed. There is a /n, so the output gives me the printing in the next line. So I have a second sentence. There is third sentence where I get a display in the third line. And look here, if I'm using ENDL manipulator, which can also be used to break the lines, then I get an output for this declaration as first sentence in the first line and second sentence in the second line. I hope you understood what's the role of a cout and how do I modify the cout with respect to the specifiers. Now let's have another understanding with the C++ language. That's nothing but a console input. And this standard console input would be given with an operator called as a right shift operator, and it is being called with a name called as extraction operator. The term extraction would refer there is a role of actual input device which gets connected to the system, and our standard input device through which the data would be operated to the programs would be a keyboard, and we pronounce cin as an object which is defined inside a class called as an iStream class. And cin is usually referred with a console input, and that is associated with a keyboard. And cin is again a binary operator which would operate on two operands, and that's been defined with a stream class called as iostream.h. Let's quickly understand the examples which is listed out here. With our first example, there is a declaration called as age of type integer, and I am just having an acceptance done for an age. So now the extractions in Cin can also be chained to request more than one value at a time. Supposingly, if I wanted to just have A and B values to be extracted from the keyboard, then my line of statement would be Cin, the greater than symbol, which I call it as an extraction, followed by a variable A, and I have one more extraction operator followed by B. And this would be equivalent to C with two lines of declarations as given below. Here, in this both the examples, the user is expected to introduce two values, one for the variable A, the another for variable B. And any kind of spacing which would try to separate between the two consecutive operations would be acted upon in this way. And if you are able to see the screen, it's nothing but I just have given a program which would give me the display of the value which is taken inside a main. Now, let's just have the quicker understanding about what are variables in C++. How do I define a variable? And most of us know variables in C++ can be declared anywhere inside a function and not necessarily at the very beginning. For example, if I just have a program which is listed out here, and this happens to be our normal C or a C++ code, I just give here the inclusion of an header file. So I've given hash include iostream.h. Then I begin my program. I declare two variables n1 and n2. I am trying to accept a value of n1 and n2 defined by both the stream classes cin and cout. I have a variable n1 for the first value, the variable n2 for the second value. I define a variable called as sum. Now, I give here the addition of two numbers, that is n1 plus n2, and that would give me the adding of two numbers, and finally I am giving a display of sum which would return the value for sum. Moving further with our quick understanding towards the variables, what are reference variables in C++? That's a very, very important term which oftenly would be asked with the C++ programmers. And how do I do the assignment operations to the reference variable which happens to be executed during a runtime? A quicker detailed answer to this question is somewhere beyond the scope of our understanding. But however, we try to have a better way of seeing the reference variables in C++. Here, what I just would like to tell is each and every operating system maintains the addresses for each variable which is defined by the programmer as it keeps allocating the memory for them during the runtime. In order to access the value of a variable, the operating system first finds the address of a variable and then it transfers the control to all those bytes whose addresses basically matches with the variable. Supposingly, I give a statement called as x is equivalent to y, which is a normal assignment for two variables x and y of integer type. Now, the operating system first finds the address for y. Then the operating system would transfer the control of all those bytes whose address matches with y. Then the operating system reads a value from the block of 4 bytes. Since we are treating a C++ language, the compiler would act upon for occupying of those many number of bytes during the runtime, and then it accepts a value, pushes the value into the stack, finds the address for x, transfers the control for the byte whose address matches with the x value, then copies the value from the stack which it has already put for y compares, and finally it's going to give an assignment. Now let's have a quicker look about the reference variable action when we are doing the same task with respect to the ordinary variable declaration. And we define a reference variable as that kind of a variable which would be operating for an existing variable. And a reference variable is nothing but a reference or an address for an existing variable. It always aims at sharing the memory location with an existing variable. And a quicker syntax towards declaring a reference variable would be followed as data type with an ampersand symbol. We need to give a reference variable name. Then I need to give an assignment to the existing variable name. So I have just taken an example here. Our total, which is of type float, is assigned with 100, and I have a sum which happens to be a reference variable of type float is assigned with an ordinary variable which is having a value as 100. Now indirectly my statement would be float ampersand sum equal to 100. That means if we make a variable sum as a reference to the variable total, then sum and total can have an interchangeability options to represent a variable. Having a quick understanding towards the declaration part, let's work out with an example. What you are observing from this simple example is x is an ordinary variable assigned with 10. Then when this line is being observed by the compiler, it allocates some blocks of memory to store the integer data called as 10. Now I display a value 10. I refer here 10 to one more reference variable by the name called as iref. And now I make or I just give iref with a value called as 20. What will happen at this point of a time? So earlier the value of x is 10. Now I am just treating the I reference value with a new value called as 20. I'm going to have a display done for x. I'm going to increment x. I'm going to have a display done for I reference. So now you could observe from this screen, I get an output for the display of x as initially 20. I get a value of x plus plus, which is our referred variable, happens to be on x, which is 20, would give me an adding of plus 1. So I will get a value there as a 21 display for me. Now moving further with our understanding of reference variables, let's have a quicker example understanding towards the second declaration. What we are observing from this declaration is x and y both are of type ordinary declarations which would have an integer type. I give a value for x. X is taken as 10. I refer this x with one more referred variable called as iref. Now I am assigning the value of iref to a new variable called as y, which is yet again of type integer. I have a display statement cout y. I am incrementing the value for y. Make a note here, quick observation. When I am getting a display, the value of y remains unchanged, whereas the value of actual x becomes changed since it's an referred variable. I just repeat again, the reference variable would give all those modifications which are initialized during the time of declaration. And it would be the same way as we are having a processing done with an ordinary variable. However, the symbol called as an ampersand would always make a sense of modifying the contents which is defined by the system. So in that sense, I got an output which gives me the display for the first cout statement for y as an ordinary variable, which is 10. Whereas I increment y and I am trying to have a display done for y, that would give me a value there as 11. Now, the reference variable can also be acted upon for passing a value to a function argument. And whenever we are passing the reference variable, we always observe the change with the value of a parameter which is being passed to the necessary function call. Now, observing the fact here, I have the value which is defined inside this void increment function, which I call as a formal argument. And I have here the beginning of the program called as main. I declare a variable x of type integer. I assign a value of x, which happens to be with 10. Make a call for an increment function. So here increment of x would be passed, and the compiler sees this line of declaration and it automatically makes a call to this function which is defined by the user. So here I have a void increment. I have a value r, where r would get all those values which is passed from the main. And in our main, we have defined the value of x as 10. So in an increment function, r would be replaced with a value called as 10. Now, inside this function call, I have the increment being done for r, and it would give me an output as 11. After we have understood the reference variable, let's have a brief about the passing of parameters and the term called as pass or call by reference. So I have just taken an illustration here to just compute the largest among two numbers, which is defined by the system. And we can just observe here this program which is written and displayed on the screen is going to give us a value as based on the inputs given by the programmer. It will give me a value to compute the largest among two numbers. So I have here in the main part of a function call, there are two variables which are defined of type integer, that's x and y. X is having a value of 10, y is given with a value of 20, and I make a call called as larger. Pass the value of x and y, which is 10 and 20. So in this larger function, x and y would be operated where its value is being treated as a referred variable. Now I assign a value -1 to this variable called as r. I'm going to have a display of x and y done. Whenever the compiler sees this line of declaration, it automatically invokes a function call called as larger, where a value of a would be assigned with x, the value for b would be assigned from y. We have a comparison for a and b. Here 10 is a value for a and 20 would be a value for b. Now the condition which gives me the return appropriately tells us if a is greater than b. Is 10 greater than 20? Definitely yes. So I'm going to have a return done as 10. So I get a value here as 10 in the output. Now in the immediate line, which is happened to be with an initialization for r as -1, I can just get a value displayed now. X, which is returned by A, gives me the display as 10. Y, which would be assigned with the value of R, will give me a value as -1. Now, let's just quite modify the contents of the same function call by defining an action where I make use of a function called as larger. I pass a value of x and y to this larger function call where the value of x is taken as 10 and y would be taken as 20. So when the compiler sees this line of declaration, larger of x comma y, that is 10 comma 20, and this would be given with an assignment called as -1, it automatically makes a call to this larger function. It defines the condition like if A is greater than B, we need to return a value of A, otherwise we need to return a value for B. And with our previous program, we can understand the role of actual referred variable would always convey the importance of changing the values to the immediate variables defined by the program. Now, let's just try to understand the term called as function prototyping in C++. It's a very important topic, and I just relate here. A function prototype is that kind of an declaration which actually omits the function body, but it will specify the function's return type, it will specify the name for the function, and it will also define the argument types. And in one line, I can just tell a function prototype is nothing but a function heading without the body of the function. And a syntax through which we have to operate with our programs is a return type, follow that with a function name, then mention the arguments which has to be given inside the list. An example here would be int add within bracket integer comma integer. I end with a semicolon, and this would give me the declaration as something called as an add function, which will have the values for A and B defined by two arguments as mentioned in the previous programs. You just have to have a keen observation on this line of declaration. In this code, we have just defined an OStream class, and we make use of a namespace through which we operate the stream data. Here you can observe there is an add function Yeah, here in this code, we can observe there is a declaration called as function prototype, and where I'm pointing an arrow, you can just see there is int add. There are two arguments of type integer. I define a main, and inside the main there would be some line of statements which would be declared, and I am calling the value for add passed with a num1 and num2, which I call as an actual parameters. And these actual parameters would be passed to the function call where the variables are referred as formal parameters. And now, whatever the value which is being given to num1 and num2, it would be transferred to the formal parameters identified by A and B. And in this code, we are performing the addition for two numbers. Now, a very important question to be addressed is why is prototyping so important in a language? And the quick answer there would be the function prototyping is always important to have a quicker identification about the return value, what a function would be specified, and how to handle these return values from the function call correctly. And it is also important to understand what would be the number of arguments which is passed to the function, whether we have a longer number of arguments or we confine ourselves with no arguments being defined by a function. All these facts would make a sense for defining an action towards the function call. Now there may be a question, what will happen if there is an absence of prototype? Yes, there can be an absence of prototype declarations as well. However, the compiler will assume the type and it will treat the returning of a value in a normal way as we would have declared it with a predefined prototype declarations. Now, this function prototyping always guarantees the protection of errors without making the faulty calls during the execution. Moving further, we can say like a function prototype also conveys or tells the compiler about the protection of errors which may arise with an incorrect assignments being done with the actual program. However, the function prototyping always does the automatic type conversions whenever it is required. Let's have a quick example understanding. In this example, which you are observing, we define a function prototype with this line number 2, and we make a call to this add function. And when a compiler sees this add function, it automatically jumps its control to the function call, where A and B would be assigned with a value called as X and Y. And in this add function, it's going to give me the computation of addition for two numbers and it appropriately returns the result back to the main. Here, we can have a function or definition which is observed with a different type of compilation. When we see the differences between a normal C language declaration having the structures being observed to that of an actual prototyping which we see with the C++ language. So here, if a function definition is in a different file and that needs to be compiled separately, then there would be no compilation time error. However, we may get a wrong results during the time of execution. There could be a question, what happens if a function prototype and a function call does not match? Yes, definitely we may come across